Happy Friday, everybody. Sandy Kreisberg here. Fridays with Sandy. Got a very exciting candidate whose name is Max. Max, why don't you say hello?
Hi, everybody. Appreciate you having me on. Honored and grateful to be invited.
Good. Okay, Max, you're 27 years old and you got a 3.5 from Tuck, which you think is the top 25% of the class, and a 710 GMAT. Okay.
Yep.
So those are the basics. Max, 27-year-old, 3.5, top 25% of the class, 710. And could you just take us through quickly? You went to Denison University, graduated in 2018. Could you just quickly tell us what you've done after that?
Sure. So after graduation, I was provided the opportunity to move out to DC and work on Capitol Hill, specifically for the congressional district that I was born and raised in. I'm from Northeast Ohio, just a little bit outside of Cleveland. And so I did a lot of policy work, very much focused in the energy and healthcare space.
Okay, let me say something personal since it's just us
Sure.
friends here. You're looking a little like a hostage video. You should be.
So I did this. I usually have a camera, but it doesn't work with my Mac strictly because I have issues with my work computer where the Wi-Fi goes
Yeah,
out. So the
it's just a
cameras,
matter
I'm stacked up on
of
both.
your facial expression or gesticulation or something. It looks like you're kind of reading stuff. So
Oh
just,
no, yeah,
yeah, I know, no, but in this case, what the appearance is more than the reality.
sure,
So I would, I'm reading, I look like I'm reading stuff because I am.
yeah,
Okay. But you're supposed to know this.
yeah. Well, so anyway, look, I covered healthcare and energy, had a lot of success, and I'm very proud of the track record that I had in terms of getting legislation signed into law, and then also working on
Okay,
issues.
I'm confused. Take it from the top. Hey, Max, how are you? Could you
Yeah,
just, let's do it this way. This is important for you. It's important for everybody else. Could you just
sure.
quickly walk me through your resume?
Sure. So spent 4 years on Capitol Hill. Then following January 6th and my boss's vote
No,
to
you've got to make it a little more organized than that. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
yeah.
Just quickly, I went to Denison University, graduated in May of 2018, and since then, I've had I've had two locations. I worked on Capitol Hill for three
Okay.
and a half years, and I'm a consultant at Deloitte now for the past 13 months. Have I got that right?
Yep.
Okay, you've got to be
Keep
able to
it
do
that
that
keep it that simple and concise.
conversation. Well, quickly walk me through your resume. Yeah,
Okay.
that I would do it that way. And could you tell me about your decision to go to Denison?
Yeah. So I was recruited pretty heavily for basketball, but I wanted to find and strike the balance between being able to play and compete, but then also ensuring that I had an opportunity to exceed academically. And for me, Denison offered that. I visited a bunch of campuses as well, and naturally, it ended up being a
How
really
many schools did you get admitted to?
uh so I kind of knew early on after
Or
early
did you just did they say, "Hey, buddy, take this now," or you know?
so Division III doesn't offer scholarships for athletics, but I knew my test scores were already adequate, and then it was one of the earliest schools I visited. I still applied to a few others for basketball purposes. I didn't If I wasn't playing basketball, I probably would have applied to some lower Ivies or so forth. But I knew pretty early on Denison was the right fit for me, and it proved to be a correct decision for many reasons.
How come? What made it the right fit?
For me, I'm not somebody that succeeds at a big university. And so I loved the tight knit
I
community.
would never say that.
I have not said that, but I used this yesterday in terms of because Tuck is very tight knit and close, and it's very much focused on collaboration. And so Denison is strikingly similar to that, where it's in a small village and they keep the population size purposefully small. And so they force students to work together, collaborate together, network across different backgrounds and sets of
Okay,
experiences.
I've given this answer every week for 12 years, and not many people have paid attention to it. I went to a blah blah high school, wherever it was located.
Hmm.
One of the things about my high school career was that I was a featured basketball player. I was recruited by several. This is why I went to Denison. I was
Yeah.
recruited as a basketball player by schools 1, 2, 3, and 4. I visited those schools. I knew people at those schools. When I visited Denizen, here's what happened.
Yeah.
The choices came down between 1, 2, and 3, and I chose Denizen because.
Yeah.
Can you do it that way? Hey,
Sure.
how come you went to Denizen?
Sure. So I was heavily recruited by a number of universities to play basketball. And I looked at Case Western University, I looked at Denison University, and I looked at Ohio Wesleyan University. And then after my visit to Denison and being able to bond with the teammates and folks that would later prove to be my classmates as well, I knew it was a right fit. And that's ultimately why I chose it.
Good. What was unexpected? This is one of their favorite school's favorite questions. What was unexpected once you got there?
The flexibility in choosing your classwork. I had a sense of it. I had a little bit of a sense of it, but not to the degree where
That's not a good answer. What did you think it was? Rogue School?
Well, you're very much right. I don't care what your major is. You're required to take those major classes. But there's a lot of flexibility to pursue because it's a liberal arts school. It's not a research university. So maybe you're right in terms of maybe that didn't surprise me. It's part of the reason.
Lousy answer. Like a good answer is one of the things that was unexpected was how many of the students were from the East Coast.
Yeah, we had a lot of kids from Chicago. I'll tell you, that surprised me. I didn't know why.
Okay, that's the
answer. Reason why they recruit so well.
I was surprised by the fact that there were a lot of kids from Chicago.
Yeah.
So that was what was unexpected, and and then be prepared to answer questions. This is one of their famous ones. This is a famous interview question. If you had your college career to do over, what would you do differently?
I would. So Denison offers it's kind of a 3-tier major almost, where you can major in philosophy, political science, and economics.
PPE, I would have done, yeah, it's famous.
I would have done PPE. I got really into philosophy my senior year and took a couple of classes. And had I found that earlier, that's what I've ultimately would have pursued.
Yeah. You couldn't do a year abroad because of the basketball, right?
Couldn't because of basketball, correct? Yeah, our season ran from October through March.
Yeah, I got it. Here's the question. See if you can answer this. This comes up a lot, and it'll help even to do handicapping. Hey, hello there. How are you, Max? Could you tell me what you're doing now?
Sure. So I am an employee at Deloitte, but I'm very much embedded at the Department of State, specifically the Bureau of Overseas Buildings Operations. And what they do is they build and then maintain.
That's a lot of information that is not well known. You've got to really slow that down and take it step by step. Right now, I'm a consultant at Deloitte Consulting, but I've got a mildly unusual gig there.
I do.
You're just a consultant.
I'm just a consultant, right?
Yeah. But I spend a lot of my advised senior leadership at the Bureau of Overseas Buildings Operations. Is that part of Deloitte or is that part of the U.S. government?
It's the U.S. government. So it's a bureau within the Department of State, and they do all the construction and maintenance of diplomatic facilities across the globe.
So is that kind of, you're kind of seconded? Is that the right word? I hope.
I use embedded.
Yeah.
I actually
spend
I spend more time in terms of conversations and work with the bureau and the employees there than I actually do internally at Deloitte, because I'm a consultant and I'm technically on the consulting side, but the project itself is actually on the advisory. And so I'm very close with the staff and have built relationship.
Where do you report for work?
Who do I report to?
Where do you go? Where do you show up in the morning?
So if I go into the office, which I go in 3 to 4 days a week, I go into the client office.
That's worth mentioning, and it's
yeah, and it's something I bring up where I've built a fantastic relationship with the senior leadership, where they invite me and bring me in to sit at the right way to frame this, their leadership table, and I am there to provide expert advice on how how Congress and how it's functioning, and how the committees can have a potential impact or will have an impact on their operations.
I'm not sure I fully understood that. You got to get this rep really.
So the way I frame it,
ready for prime time. You've got to make it. You got a lot to stop. You got a lot to explain.
Yeah.
And it's stuff people don't know.
Right.
You've got to slow down, and you got to make it simple. This is critical.
Mm-hmm.
It's often the first question. Hey, could you tell me what you're doing now? If you gave the answer that you just gave me, or that you've been struggling with,
Mm-hmm.
it would be damaging.
Okay.
You gotta work on that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll improve that. The way I've been framing it is I say, look, I work in sort of two buckets. One is advising them on how which Congress is similar to a board.
You're talking about buckets in Congress. The person interviewing you doesn't know. Sometimes all they've got is your resume. They don't know who you are. They think you're a basketball coach. If the question is, what are you doing now? You go, I work for Deloitte Consulting, and I've been there for however long, but I've got a special role at Deloitte.
Yeah.
Where I actually am seconded or embedded in the federal government's overseas buildings operation, OBO, because I have expertise in that.
Mm-hmm.
You get the idea?
Yeah, I like it. It's succinct.
Yeah, and it's got to be simple.
Yeah.
And because if you get into the deep end, it's over.
I mean, that's the whole part of it too, is the work that I do. Not many people understand even how Congress and federal government does work. So if I can avoid.
Yeah, particularly, and they don't understand. Yeah, that's one thing you got going against you.
Yeah.
Another difficulty is you don't work for the government.
Yeah, okay. I'm technically a Deloitte consultant, but
so you got to explain all that. You got to go. Happy to tell you what I'm doing now. It's a little complicated. I'm a Deloitte consultant, but I'm embedded in the U.S. government office of overseas building operations. So let me tell you a little bit about that and what I do there.
Yeah, I like that.
In other words, I'm leading you baby steps.
Yeah, and then we can kind of open that box and choose.
Well, let them ask questions.
Yeah.
Here's another question. Hey, how are you? Could you tell me what you did yesterday, or your last typical work? What do you do in a typical work day?
So it very much it depends, particularly on a given week. This week was interesting, and we think we're recording this the first week of October. The Speaker of the House was vacated on Tuesday. It's the first time in American history. And so for the past 48 hours, really, I have been digging into understanding what the potential impacts could be to the Bureau, particularly now in the appropriations process, because everything is going to grind to a halt on Capitol Hill because of the dysfunction that's happening currently.
Yeah, but that's generic. That hasn't got anything to do with overseas buildings operations.
So this is where it gets very much in the weeds, where because the House right now cannot function, it cannot move any appropriations, and the appropriations CR is going to expire in 45 days. And if that expires, it results in a government shutdown that then
we all know that. That's very dramatic, but it's not what they want to hear. That's what they tune into CNN to learn about. Now they're tuning into you, and they want to know what you do in a typical week.
Right. So I'd say following the macro trends and synthesizing that in a way where it makes it easy to understand is one half of it. And then the other half is building tools to help monitor and analyze Congress. So I build guides, I build frameworks for them to understand quickly. And I train their staff to understand quickly how the Bureau and their employees. So when I'm not advising the senior leaders, I'm working with their congressional affairs team that they have within the Bureau, and I'm training them and coaching them.
I'm sort of here's the answer. I'm kind of an internal consultant to the the Bureau of Overseas Building Operation, which is an organ of the United States government, right? Is that correct?
Yes, it's a bureau within the Department of State, which obviously then is within the federal government.
Yeah, okay. So I'm an internal consultant to a State Department subdivision called the Overseas Building Operations. What we do is the State Department has a lot of overseas buildings, as you might imagine. And my job as an internal consultant is to do 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see why that's a good way to do it?
Yeah, it logically flows much better.
Yeah, and it's simpler, and you can actually follow it.
Yeah.
And then they'll drill down and ask you from they'll interrupt, they'll drill down, they'll say, "What does that do?" What
Yeah.
the interview you had recently? What did the interviewer do when you told him what you did?
She didn't really ask too many follow-up questions. She seemed to be following pretty
You had a
easy.
script.
She had a script, so she was going off the script, and she pivoted more to the behavioral questions quickly as opposed to the resume.
Yeah. Okay. For those of you joining us late, Mr. Candidate Max here has already been interviewed by a business school, so he's got one interview under his belt. Good. Tell me about what you consider to be your best accomplishment in your current gig and why.
In my current position at Deloitte.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I established
which is with the OBO.
With OBO, correct. Yeah, I established and continue to run a weekly, we call it a newsletter, pretty much a weekly newsletter where I am synthesizing everything that's happening on Capitol Hill. Part of that's doing a recap of relevance to OBO, and then also synthesizing what's happening so that they can understand the political incentives and dynamics that are driving outcomes. I have to be careful about prognosticating too much because there are limitations as a consultant within Deloitte. But I continue to run that, and that gets shared with the senior leaders and has also been shared with the Undersecretary of Management, John Bass.
How did you set that up? Was that your idea, or did you inherit something small and make it bigger? Or
no, it was my idea, and I give great kudos though to my project manager within Deloitte. He gives me a lot of autonomy and flexibility to be creative and drive value, and so I was seeing a weakness within Department of understanding what's happening.
Okay, let me give you some tough love here, Max. You've got to sound more conversational. You're too entwined with government speak.
I spent too much time talking to politicians and being around them that I've been told that I sometimes come off as scripted because it's easy for me to speak that way.
That can be very damaging in business school interviews. Yeah, here's a hard question. What do you want your classmates to know about the United States Congress?
That currently it has a lot of poor incentives for member behavior. I think my frustration personally, and something I try to explain to people, is the institution has changed over 30 years. And that's the time frame I'd like to use, where 30 years ago members came and they were focused on policy, focusing on serving their community. Now they like to use it as an opportunity to create a platform for themselves and be performative. And that
so what's changed is they've become Congress politicians have become performers.
Yeah,
the thing that's
they
really
see themselves as
changed
performers
is
on a stage.
People come to Congress to build a brand,
right?
And
it's
that is
how do I serve my community? It's how do I get a spotlight on CNN or Fox News, whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's not how I serve my community. It's how I appear on my community's TV screens.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Okay, could you give me a roadmap of what you'd like to do after business school? Like, what would you want your first job to be, and then your second job, and what do you see yourself at the highlight of your career?
Before I dive into this, and then when I answer that question, I like to tell there's a bit of a backstory that explains very quickly where I want to pivot to. Is it worth diving into that?
My advice is usually answer the question immediately. People who start with backstories often never get to the story.
So I'd like to serve as either an interim CEO or serve as a chief of staff to a CEO. at a company. But my former boss at Capitol
This
Hill.
is out of business school.
Correct.
Okay, so my first job out of business school would be to do this, and it's a job that it's slightly unusual, but here's why it works for me, and then you can get the backstory.
Okay. Yeah. So the backstory is that my former boss on Capitol Hill is now in private equity, and he actually called me this past summer and tried to pitch me on the opportunity to go be an interim CEO at a company that they were buying. And this is actually, it segues into why.
Yeah, you could tell them that. You could
Yeah,
go.
I said that
My
yesterday.
first job out of business school is a little unusual. My prior boss asked me if I wanted to do this, and I said, "Yeah, hold that thought for 2 years. I'm going to business."
That's exactly the segue, and the answer is I need classes on strategy and accounting and finance to really build the foundation so that when I have that opportunity again, I can have full confidence in my ability to perform well.
Yeah, just tone it down a little bit. Just say it would be a great opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. But even when I'm out of school, right, it's going to be subject to
Okay, so then what would so that would be a good first job out of business school. And how do you see your career going from there?
So as I mentioned at the outset, I'm from Northeast Ohio, and ultimately I want to get back to Northeast Ohio, and that's how I want to serve the community, is building businesses. There's a great example of TransDigm, which it was purchased at 40 million, and now the market cap is 45 billion over the course of 3 years.
You're not answering the question. You're giving lectures. It's really damaging, man.
Okay.
I ain't kidding you.
Okay. Yeah. My purpose is I want to get back to Northeast Ohio and be able to run companies that can have a positive impact in the community, because I'm concerned about brain
You
drain.
just just don't do the explanation. Just show, don't tell. So a good second job for me would be at a company like A, B, or C, which are located in the Midwest, where I want to ultimately return to.
Yeah.
So a good second job for me would be as the co-manager of whatever at this company. You get the idea?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's really helpful if you could have at your fingertips 3 positions at 3 different companies.
Mm-hmm.
So like a good second job for me would be like to be the assistant thing at company A, or this job or that job. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, boy, this guy has thought about things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then what's a job you'd like to see as, the height of your career? Where do you see yourself in 20, 25 years?
I see myself as a CEO at a company in Northeast Ohio, either in the healthcare or energy space.
Why are you so committed to Northeast Ohio?
Because I care very deeply about my community. I was born and raised in it, helped shape and form me. The reason I even came out to Capitol Hill in DC in the first place was an opportunity to serve and give back.
It sounds like you belong in government. Are you thinking about running for office somewhere down the line?
No, I have very little interest in being that publicly facing. I liked working behind the scenes, but I don't necessarily see myself as being a formal politician in any sense.
I'm not sure it's a good answer. I'd say it's not my first choice, but it's there.
If I was called to serve, and my community asked me to, I would consider it. But it's not something I'm going to outwardly.
People don't get called to Congress. They run for it, and they raise. People don't get called. They make calls.
Yeah,
as I'm sure you know.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of ambition. There's a lot of ego in this town.
Right. I wouldn't rule it out. I'd say I could see myself running for office at some point, and then try and find people in Congress with MBAs.
Yeah. Oh, I worked for one, right?
Yeah. That my role model is this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was offered, or I was asked if I would be interested in working for Mitt Romney even prior to his retirement announcement. That's another guy that had an MBA, was had that business experience and applied it to government, and it wasn't the right fit for me. But in any event, like there are some solid members. Given we can focus on the negatives, but there are still a lot of positive attributes that we should remain optimistic about.
Don't be defensive. That's what you're being.
Okay.
I'm serious. It's not a look they like.
Yeah.
You're applying to business school. Businessmen, when businessmen sound defensive, it's usually because they're being prosecuted for something. Okay.
Yeah.
Businessmen are usually explaining what's new and what's great about what they're about to do.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying is very subtle, but it's real important.
Yeah.
Good. What can you name some role model business leaders for you?
Yeah. The first one that comes to mind for me is, and I mentioned this a little prior and in a previous question, but Nick Halley, he stepped back now as CEO of TransDigm, but he's been a fantastic leader in terms of driving value and thinking strategically about how we can take lessons from private equity and still apply it even when we're a public company. And I think that's something I find very valuable.
That's good. That's a good answer. How specific could you be about it? It would help if you had some
Oh, I mean, so I came across it.
Points about that.
I don't know if this is I'm curious and welcome your advice on this. I mean, the way I found him is there's a great podcast called 50X, and Will Thorndike is the guy that runs it. And he did a deep dive in these interviews with Nick Halley, and he talks about one of the lessons I learned from it. He talks about 3 Ps, and this is their culture focused on these 3 Ps, and it was price, productivity, and profitable new business. And it's something I found very intriguing. And then alongside his focused on a decentralized organization, that concept, and then the success that followed, I really enjoyed learning about.
Good. How many times have you taken the GMAT?
I took it 3 times. I went 670, 690, 710. In hindsight, I wish I'd taken it once more. But I found you guys late, and I found your feedback too late, where I was already in the midst.
The feedback is for guys like you. The difference between a 710 and a 730 is a lot.
Yeah.
It just is. If you hadn't taken it 3 times, I would have recommended. If you were taking it once, I would have said, "Man, you take it again."
Keep shooting.
And a 730 really can make a difference. Drum roll, please. Okay, I don't think you're getting into HBS, and apparently neither do they, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were dinged at HBS without interview. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. You're a nice guy, but you're
like I said earlier, I was punching above my weight.
Yeah, you're a white male, and
710,
yeah, and with a 710, yeah, you're a Tuck kind of guy. They like you've been active, you've organized things, you're kind of a leader. They like people from government. So I think your chances of getting into Tuck are, you had the interview, it went okay.
Yeah. I wish we did this Wednesday, so I could have refined a couple of things and
but basically,
sharper. But all things considered, it was a nice conversation, and I'm very high on Tuck. It's at the very top of the list. So if I were offered, that's probably where I would go.
Yeah. Did you communicate that to her?
Yeah, I mentioned specifically that it was #1 on the list.
Okay, good. I think Columbia, there's a lot of guys. Columbia is going to be hard. There's a lot of guys like you.
Yeah.
They prefer higher. The stats really count for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Columbia is a little bit of a reach. And I've got the same feeling about Booth. they're maybe less number focused, but it's just a lot of guys like you. Do
Mhm.
you do a lot of guys at Deloitte go to Booth?
Actually, we didn't cross paths at Denison. He graduated a year before I started, but he's now a senior manager, also at Deloitte based out of New York. He's a good friend and mentor. He went from Deloitte to Booth, but he did the GSAP because he's kind of with GSAP is Deloitte's where you go for 2 years, you come back and they pay for it. He did that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, talk to him about what it's like. I think, look, I like it. You got a lot going for you. And applications are down. I wouldn't call any of these a safety school. Okay.
Yeah.
You're 27. I guess the worst thing that could happen is this the way you're thinking? I can apply again next year.
I mean, I could apply in round 2 to a couple different schools. There's a couple that I left off. I would consider Michigan or Kellogg as well.
Yeah, Kellogg wouldn't be a safe school either, but
Yeah,
you're there to
I
play.
know they like the qualitative stuff
Yeah,
quite a bit, and I've certainly got that track record. And there's some stories that I used in my. There's a story that I
yeah,
used.
you're a Kellogg.
We didn't even touch on.
Yeah, you're a Kellogg tech.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the way I see it. I like you, Max, and let us know how things turn out. And it's been great talking to you.
No, absolutely.
If you really have a question, I'm happy to.
Well, no, well, let me just express my gratitude for you and the time. I love honest feedback. I take with it. I roll with it. I'd rather have
Yeah.
that than somebody, I don't know, boost my ego or boost my confidence and morale. So that's why I love been watching previous shows and why I wanted to do it, just to hear from you personally what are my weaknesses are, where do I need to be better, and I certainly got that, and I appreciate that.
Great. Thank you, and thank you for that. Okay, pal.
All right,
Good
thank you
luck.
guys.